Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank God.
Gosh.
All right. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, so we were talking about the issue of passing in front of the person who's praying. So it says Beit Yosef regarding that, Beresh Perek Tefilat HaShachar. It's over there in Brachot, Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Rav Ikla Lebeg Ganiba, right? So Rav happened to be in this place of this rabbi, his yeshiva, whatever it was, Yetzale Shel Shabbat, Be'erev Shabbat. So what happened was that he prayed the prayer of Shabbat on Erev Shabbat, meaning what? That it was a little bit early. And this rabbi was praying Achorei de Rav. So he was praying in the back of Rav. We talked about that, right? Not to do that. The Siyam Rav. So Rav finished. So what happened was that he didn't want to interrupt the prayers of Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Gemara says, Shema Mina Tlat. You learn there three things from there. You learn also there that you're not allowed to pass in front of the person who's praying. Messiah Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi supports this rabbi. The Amar Asur La'avor Keneged Mitpalim. He also says that. The Gemara says, wait a second, but the high Rabbi Abi and Rabbi Yaseh, these two rabbis, they used to pass in front of the person who's praying. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yaseh, Chutz L'Dalad Amot Tu De Chalfe. So Gemara answers, those rabbis were passing outside of 4 amot. Right? That's okay. But inside 4 amot, not okay. Rashi explains, the La Paskel Etzlote Kilomar, that means he didn't stop his prayer, means to say that Lo Yipsik ben Rabbi Yirmiyah lekotel. He didn't want to separate, right, or interpose between Rabbi Yirmiyah and the wall. And go in front of him, walk in front of him, and then go sit in his place. So what did he do? He just stood there waiting, until this rabbi finishes. Okay. And that which it says, right, that this only applies in front of a Betzadim mutar, but on the side it's allowed to pass. That's what it said in the tour. Yesterday we read that. Ken katav Rabbeinu Yonah Sham. That's what it says also, Rabbeinu Yonah. That's what he says. Asur la'avor keneged hamitpalim. You're not allowed to pass in front of the prayers. But davka keneged penehem. That's only in front of them. Abal pitzidam. But on the side, lo chayshinan le'avarat be'alma. So then we're not concerned about, passing on the side. And then he goes on, you're allowed to stand there, he says, right? So what does that mean? You pass and stand. That's what he says. So the question is, what does that mean? So he says, it's written for it's learned from what we learned, what's written. The beginning of this siman, beginning of this chapter. Right. So they only forbade to sit there in that area. But to stand there, they didn't forbid. So from there you see that if he was allowed to stand there, all the more so it's allowed to pass. That's even better because you're not staying there. That's the way he explains it, the Bet Yosef. That's a good explanation. Okay, so let's see Bet Yosef here. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. Yeah. So says Shulchan Aruch, Asur la'avor keneged mitpallim. You're not allowed to pass in front of the person who's praying. Betoch da'al amot, within 4 amot. V'davka lifnehem, and that's only in front of them. Aval betzidehem mutar, but on the side you're allowed. La'avor ve'la'amod, right? You can pass and stand there, right? As we said. All the more so you're allowed to pass by, right, and just leave. That's even better. Okay, so that's Dalid. We have also Hey coming up. Okay. I remember when I was in my younger days, I was learning over here in one of the yeshivot in the Queens called Chafetz Chaim. In the old days, they were in Forest Hills. They were not on Main Street. So in those days, whatever, there was the mashgiach over there was this guy, Rabbi Nyman, whatever, you know. So one time he saw me passing by the people who are praying, you know. So he tells me, he says, "What? Don't you know it's not allowed to pass by there?" So I told him, I said, "Yeah, but it was more than 4 amot, you know, so it's allowed." So he tells me, he says, "No," he says, "It's not allowed. Even more than 4 amot is not allowed." So you know, I was astonished at him, you know, like he's going against the Shulchan Aruch. There are some other poskim, by the way, who don't even allow that, but the Shulchan Aruch is the Shulchan Aruch, you know. Well, you can't rely on the Shulchan Aruch. So, like, I couldn't figure out, you know, like, what's bothering you, you know, like, I'm doing like the Shulchan Aruch, but something is wrong. You know, some people are a little bit too, they exaggerate a little bit too much, a little bit. I mean, they don't realize that the halakha is like the Shulchan Aruch. What do you want? But the truth is, you know, that there are other sources that are more stringent. It's true. But this is the halakha. Halavai that we should do, you know, just this. This is good enough, you know. That would be great if we would just do this much. Okay, so anyway, let's go on a little bit. So he brings here, right, Katav Rabbeinu Gadol Bari Avuhav. Says the Maria, Shebe'orchot Chaim, that in this book, Dikdek Me'uvda de Rabbi Yirmiyah Bar Abba, he learned from this, deduced from this story about this rabbi, Shem Hishlim Tfilato. So he says, if he finished his prayer, Ve'aya Adam Acher Mitpalel Achorav, and there was somebody else praying behind him, She'asur Lifsoa Shalosh Pesiot Ad Shegmor, right, so then you're not allowed to step back into the space of the person who's behind you. Because when you do that, it's just like you're passing in front of the person who's praying. Same thing, same concept. You know, so this is also forbidden. When you're so it says, it seems like we have to deduce from here. Even if the other guy started to pray afterwards, after him, once he started, right, unconditional, then you gotta wait. Once he started. That's the Maria Abu Hab. Okay, so it says Maran, that's the what also comes out from Yerushalmi. Perek Bet, Rosh Hashanah, over there in Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Chia v'Rabba Hava Kaim Matzle Al. So this rabbi was praying there, whatever, and Al Rab Kahana Bekam Le Matzle. So then this rabbi came, right, and also started to pray. I mean, Achoroi, right? So he got in back of him, and started praying over there, right? This is like bad news, when somebody comes in back of you and starts praying in back of you, you're going to get into trouble with this. He's going to make you suffer, this guy, right? So, because you have to wait till he finishes, So it's not a pleasant sight, right? That whole thing. So it says, Man de chasa Rabbi Chia barba mitzlota yativ le de lo miavor como Rav Kahana de marich mitzlote. Man de chasa Rav Kahana amale hakiyatu nehegin gabechon metzarin Rav Rivchon amale Rav Ana midebet Eli uketiv al the bet Eli. It says about bet Eli, im itchaper avon bet Eli בזבח ומנחה, עד עולם בזבח ומנחה, אין מתחפר לו, אבל מתחפר לו בתפילה. So what's the story over here? Right, that the whole story goes like this, right? That one rabbi, as we said, got in front of another, in back of the other rabbi, and they started to pray. So what happened was that the rabbis complained, about him, and told him, "Why do you do that? Well, don't you know, you're making your rabbi suffer because you're making him wait for you until you finish, and you pray long. So you're making him suffer. Why do you do that?" So they answered him, right? Oh, okay, no, that's something else. Because this Rav Kahana, right, that was doing this, right, you know what the word Kahana means, right? In Aramaic. You know what that means? Kahana.
No, I don't know what it means.
It means Kohen, right? Kohen, he's a Kohen. Kahana is Kohen. Right? So, yeah. So what does that mean? This guy was a Kohen, and as we already told over the story about Eli, right? Kohen, we learned all these halachot from that story over there. So Eli Kohen, he was descended from him, this guy. This guy was descended from Eli, Rav Kahana. He was a Kohen. So why do we care about that? What's the reason why we care about that? If he's descended from him or not. So the answer is like this, right? That what happened was that Eli, he had sons. And the sons were not going in the ways of Hashem. They were like doing some bad things. So what happened was that Hashem got angry at Eli because he didn't rebuke his sons that were going on the wrong way. I'm sorry, if you could just excuse me for a second. I have somebody on the door here ringing the bell like nonstop. So I have to take a break. 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So, as we said, right, that what happened was that this rabbi was, causing problems by praying long like that. So he tells him, he says, well, I'm from Eli. So now why did that matter so much? Because Eli was cursed, from the story that I told you just now. He received a curse from Hashem because he didn't rebuke his children. They were doing some wrong things there. I don't want to get into the whole story there. It's not relevant for us. But anyway, right, the point is that he said that the verse says about the house of Eli, they were cursed. And one of the curses that they got was they're going to die young. All of them are going to die young. So what does that mean to die young? They're going to die by the age of 18, right? Which is a very big curse. Can you imagine? They won't live past 18. So he says, right, but there is a caveat there. There's an exception, right? That if they learn Torah and, do pray and do acts of kindness, all these kinds of things, so then their life will be extended, right? This whole thing. So he says, what do you want from me? I'm just like doing my thing here, trying to extend my life, right? Because I'm from Eli, so I'm trying to pray long, so that my life can be extended. That's what he told them. So because of that, right, he sort of like he had an excuse, whatever, for what he did. But anyway, right, the point is, you see from here, for sure, one thing, right, that a person shouldn't do this. He shouldn't bother his rabbi, and stand in back of him. So he has to wait for him, to finish his prayers. So you learn from this whole story that a person who, finishes prayers and there's somebody behind him still praying, he's not allowed to step back, and to go into a space there. That's what we learn. So it's an important halakha to know that, right? It can be sometimes very annoying, that's the thing. So you gotta deal with it. What can you do, right? It is what it is. Okay, so that's the end of the Bet Yosef.
Rabbi.
Yes.
What I see people do, I don't know if this is right. I want to ask you right now. Like if somebody's praying right behind them, and the guy in the front finished first, they take 3 steps back, like to the side. Is that allowed?
They go towards the side. Yeah, there are some authorities that allow that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To go towards the side. It's like sort of a what we call like a heter, like a little bit shady.
Yeah.
Not exactly a clear heter.
Is it to rely on?
I'm sorry?
Is it something to rely on, or we should just wait?
Well, let's see what it says in Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll see what it says in the Achronim. Right? Mishnah Brura and Magen Abraham. We'll see what it says there. Let's take a look. Okay. From the old days when I learned these halachot, from my memory, my recollection goes that this is only like in times of in times of need, you can rely on something like that. Like it's a very pressing situation. Okay, we'll see anyway, right? Let's see what it says in Shulchan Aruch. So says Shulchan Aruch in Hey, Im yishlim tfilato ve'aya adam acher mitpalel acharav. If he finishes prayers, right, and somebody was in back of him, asur lifsoa gimel pesil. You're not allowed to go back 3 steps. Ad shegmor misha acharav, until the person behind him finishes his prayers. It's tfilato. Shem Yah says there, because if he does so, so it's considered like he's passing, in front of the person who's praying. But look what he says, right? You have to be careful about this, he says. You have to be stringent. Even if the last guy started, the guy behind you, right? Even after you started to pray. So once he started, right, that's it, you're stuck. So what do you see from here, right? Bet Yosef and Shulchan Aruch and the Tur, they don't recognize this heter, the one you mentioned, right? They don't recognize that because they didn't write it. It's very simple. They didn't bring this down. So now let's look at the Achronim a little bit, right? And see what's going on. So We'll see the Mishnah Berurah here. So interesting, right? He says something interesting here, Mishnah Berurah, Siv Katan Yutet, that if he's not like straight behind you, but like a little bit to the side, he's like off to the side, not right behind you. He's to the side. So it says, right, that it seems like it's allowed. He brings the Eliyahu Rabbah, right, who allows that. Interesting, right? Heter. There's definitely some merit to this because, why? Because it's not really against the Shulchan Aruch what he's saying here. Because the Shulchan Aruch was talking about a case where he's right behind you, And here we're talking about he's, towards the side. So it's not really the same thing, So I could definitely go for this heter there, for the Mishnah Berurah. Let's see what else we can scrounge up here. Right, so in Kafchet, right, Kufchet, he says here, right, so he makes an interesting definition here, the Mishnah Berurah, right? He says that when we say that you step back 3 steps, okay, we're talking about a case where he says, Mayre betoch daled amot o she'avo betoch daled amot. That means that he's like, either he's within 4 amot of this person, or by stepping back, he's going to be within 4 amot. Right? One or the other. That's pretty clear what he's saying. I think his words are clear. Because otherwise, it shouldn't be a problem, If it's more than 4 amot, as we said, right? You're good. You can pass by there. Not like this rabbi from Chafetz Chaim, right? It doesn't go like that. Okay, whatever. But anyway, so let's see next Mishnah Berurah.
Is that what happens in practice, though? Do people generally stagger themselves if they're so they're not standing directly in front of somebody?
Well, I must tell you, there's all kinds of arrangements, arrays in the synagogues, and you know what it is also, right? There's 2 different kinds of prayers, generally, right? There's the yeshiva prayer, and then there's the, synagogue prayer, you know what I mean? A little bit different. Yeshiva, synagogue, not exactly the same thing, But anyway, right, the truth is that when things get crowded, definitely somebody can be right behind you. There's no,
Does it matter if there's if you have benches or if you have chairs or something, where you have your own
Oh, okay. Well, you got me to something interesting there. Oh, okay. So the truth is, right, that there is also another opinion, right, brought down in the later authorities, which says that if there's, behind you some kind of a partition, okay, and that partition, by the way, we call it mechitza, right, in Hebrew, right? There's a mechitza. So if that partition has 10 tfachim, up to your waist from the floor or close to the floor, so some say, right, that allows you to step back because the partition, puts you into a different domain. But I did see in Yalkut Yosef, he doesn't like this heter, He says, no, it's not good. So, there's a lot of disputes about these things. These little, these borderline cases.
So if you're at shul and you're davening and you've got a chair behind you that's not suitable height for that, and there's someone davening behind you, you can't step back even though you have your own
Right. So then you should wait, as we said, right? You should wait. Yeah. But I would just like to go through the Mishnah Berurah here. Let's see what he says here. Just interested. Okay, let's see what we got here. Yeah, so Mishnah Berurah is pretty much done here. So let's see if there's anything else here besides Mishnah Berurah. Maybe Magen Abraham, something that we can put our fingers on a little bit, chew it out. No, the truth is I don't see anything besides the Mishnah Berurah here. So, right, yeah, you know what? Maybe we should look in the Yalkut Yosef and see what he says. Let's go to Yalkut Yosef. I'm going to stop the share and do a new share. Okay, 1 second, please. So I can show you the screen. So this is always, an issue, by the way, a big issue when it comes to prayers. Always comes up. People always neglect it. It's one of the most neglected halachot that we have. There's no question about that. Okay. As I told you guys yesterday, right? Rabbi Feinstein, Alav Shalom, he waited 45 minutes for some guy to finish. He wouldn't pass in front of him. So you can see from there, right? learn some good manners. Okay. A real tzaddik, They called him, Moshe Feinstein, they called him the Rabbi of America. He was America's rabbi. Okay. All right, so let's see what we got here. He doesn't really have much here, actually. That's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. I went into the Shulchan Aruch by mistake. 1 second. Give me a second. One second. Now we're there. Okay. We're getting there. So just, right, nice detail here it gives you, right? As we said, what's 4 amot? It's about 2 meters, right? Or 6 feet. So it gives you the more precise, 1.92 meters, right? This whatever. If you like more precise, 1.92, right? That applies to a lot of things, a lot of halachot. Okay, so here you go, right? Regarding your question, he says there, right, that, you remember we talked about this issue about, going towards the side, right, stepping back towards the side. So he says here, right, that if you're going to wind up when you step back to that person's side, because you're going towards the side, you're going sideways, right? It's diagonal, you're going diagonal. So he says that's okay because you're going to wind up towards side. And we already said, right, that the side is allowed. It's a little bit tricky, the truth is, this heter. But he does allow it here in the Yalkut Yosef. But the truth is, again, we don't see this heter in the Bet Yosef or Shulchan Aruch. Even in the Mishnah Berurah, we don't see it, So it is somewhat of a heter, What can I tell you? It is what it is. So then he brings the Zohar over here, right? That what according to the Zohar, even more than 4 amot is forbidden, right? But we don't paskin like that, right? That's Chassidut, that's stringent, But according to the Zohar, you can't pass in front of the person who's praying, even far away. But he does say, right, that we don't really have to do like the Zohar says. But if you want to be stringent, right, you'll be blessed. So whatever. Okay. So then he brings another variation, right, which is that, let's say, right, the guy who's praying in the back of you, his face is covered with a talit, so he can't see you passing by. So is that allowed or it's not allowed? That's the question, right? So here he seems to be stringent about that, right? Not to rely on that. The fact that his face is covered with a talit. He says, don't rely on that. Okay, that's another variation. But here, right, here's your redemption, Jonathan, right? This is your redemption, right? It says the Kohen, right, as we said yesterday, right? He's allowed to, right, to do this in order to wash his hands for Birkat HaKohanim. Let's see what he's saying over here. Right. So truth is, he's a little bit stringent about this. Look what he says. Right. He says that he should try to refrain from this. If he washes his hands in the morning, right, and his hands are still clean, so you can rely on that. But he says if the person who's praying in back of him is more than 4 amot, then he should pass by and wash his hands. That only applies when, right, when he knows that his hands are clean, right? He guarded his hands. That's what he says here, But if he didn't guard his hands, so then he has to go and wash. There's no choice. So there you go, right? So the Yalkut Yosef says that he can rely on this, and not go to wash his hands because he can rely on what he did in the morning. Interesting. Okay, what else we got here? This is an interesting one, by the way. He brings over here, which I saw also in other books, written about this. So he says, what about where the person who's like standing in a public like place where people pass, it's like a passageway. So people are always passing there, and he's blocking the way there. So what does that mean? He really shouldn't be praying there at all. He shouldn't have prayed there, So in a case like that, he says some allowed to pass by him because, he's doing something wrong himself by praying there. But he only allows it if you're like going to your fixed place of prayer or going to learn Torah. In other words, you're doing some kind of a mitzvah. Right? So he says basically, right, in a time of need, you can rely on this, the leniency here. Okay, all kinds of interesting things here. So again, right, he brings us here this idea that some are lenient, to go towards the side when he's in back of you, when he's praying in back of you. He brings this over here. Yesh mekilin, some are lenient, right? Okay, so right, you see, it's not exactly 100% this heter, it says yesh mekilin, some are lenient about it. Okay. All right, so we have all kinds of interesting things, but that's pretty much. So yeah, so honestly, the best thing to do is like it says in the Shulchan Aruch. If you can do that, you're good. But whatever. I mean, these other opinions. Sometimes we need them in a case of need, a case of emergency, whatever it is. Okay, interesting. So that's the end of the chapter. We'll go to the next chapter, which is Kuf Gimel 103. So it says here in the Tur, Haya omed b'tfilah, v'nitatesh perush yatsa mimenu ruach derech mata, right? So let's say, right, he was praying, he was in the middle of the prayers, and all of a sudden, right, he, by accident, right, he, passed the wind. It happens sometimes. It slips out, whatever. So what should he do in a case like that, right? He should wait till it says the smell, goes away, and then and then goes back to pray. So that's the case where, it happened by accident, right? So he wasn't able to hold it in. It happened. So you wait till the smell goes away, and you continue. We already mentioned, by the way, that you should try not to allow this to happen because it's a bad sign for you. If this happens in your prayers, so therefore a person should try to hold it in if he can. Sometimes, he can't hold it. It comes out by accident, whatever it is. Otherwise, you should try to avoid it altogether. Okay, so that's the first case, right? Then he says, but if he not, in other words, if he needs to pass wind, right, and he can't hold it, and so then what does he do? Step back, right? 4 amot, and do what you have to do, right? Pass your wind. Then you wait till the smell goes away. And then once it goes away, he goes back to his place, right? There's a certain like prayer that they say here. V'omer, Ribon ha'olamim, right? Like this. Master of the universe. Right? You created us with all kinds of cavities and holes. It's known right before you. Cherpatenu, right? Our shame. Klimatenu. Cherpa klima bechayenu. Lima v'torah b'motenu. That we're shameful creatures. We can't hold these. We're physical creatures. What can we do, right? Yeah. So then he goes back and returns to the place where he was praying, right? Mitatesh, tfilato. Okay, so yeah, that's what he says here. Okay, so let's see the Bet Yosef here. Bet Yosef brings a source, right? What's the source for this? Perek Misha Meto, right? Brachot, Chavdal Amud Bet. It's over there. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch here. This chapter seems to be short. Okay. It says Shulchan Aruch, Asur Leshet, no, I'm sorry. Next one. Ooh. No, not this chapter. Next one. Yeah, this one. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, Haya omed b'tfilah v'yatsa mimenu ruach milamata. Right, as we said, he was praying. And some wind escaped him there, some gas. Mamtin ad sheyichle hareach. So what should he do? Right, wait till the smell goes away. V'chozer u'mitpaler, and then he returns to pray, right, wherever he stopped. This is what we do. Okay, so then let's go back to the Bet Yosef. So says Bet Yosef, right? Regarding what the Torah said, that if he needs to, right, pass wind, what should he do? Step back, as we said, right? So it's also there in the Gemara. If he needs to pass wind, he should step back 4 amot, and all that, the whole thing, the whole story there. And once the smell goes away, Omer, right? It's this prayer that he says, right? The mitpaler, then he goes back to pray. So it says, the Rabbeinu Yonah wrote this, V'arosh and the Rosh, right? Katab Bala Lachok Delorot, and writes this book, Chozer et Filato. He returns to his prayers. When it seems like he's coming to teach you, Shechozer leMakom shepasak, that he should continue the place where he stopped. Once he does this whole process. That's what it says also in Tosfot. This language of Rambam. What does the Rambam say? Right? If he needs to pass wind, needs to air and he's like, he's suffering, right? He can't hold it in. So what did you do? Go back 4 amot, as we said, right? The whole thing. So it says, right, Bet Yosef, it's clear that, even though we said this halakha, but if a person can hold it in, he should, He should only do this if he can't hold it. Otherwise, try to hold it in. So he says, Katav Rabbeinu Yonah, says Rabbeinu Yonah, Me'alech acharav dal amot. He goes back 4 amot, mitpalel, lichora, and he prays, lichora mashma de mishum ma'achi, implies that because of this, Amar le'acharav, he steps back, because he has to be playing in the same direction, in the same direction as before. So if he would, step in towards the front, So then he would leave it behind him. So that seems like, he's stopping to pray altogether. He doesn't want to return to his prayers. So he says, this Rabbi Katav, right? That which he said, right? They should step back. Why didn't he say step up, right? Whatever, forward. Yesh lomar, there is to say, shediber benahug, right? He's talking about the custom. In other words, the common practice, right? Shamitpalel samuch lekotel. So usually, right, as we said, right, the good boys, the good girls also, right? Where should the good girls and boys pray? Next to the wall, right? That's the best place to pray. So if that's the case, right, you can't really step up because you're right in front of the wall. So the only thing you can do is step back. That's what he says. יש לומר שדיבר בינם כשמתפלל מתפלל סמוך לפוצל ואין לו מקום לפניו, אבל קשה, but he says difficult a little bit. Why? למה לא אמר לצדדיו? Why didn't he say right towards the side? Why not to the side? Right? ויש לומר, so he answers, he says, שבא להודיע, I'm coming to teach you, שירחיק עצמו במקום שכינה, that he should distance himself from the place of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, וזה לא יהיה בהרחקה אמיתית אלא לאחוריו. That's only going to be when you step back, right? ולפי דברי רבנו יונה, so it says, according to רבנו יונה, שנתן טעם מפני שצריך שיהיה פניו וכנגד המקום. Right, so he gave a reason that because he needs to, right, be in front of Hashem, the same direction as before, שהתחיל להתפלל, הדבר פשוט לצדדים, right? So then it's clear that going towards the side, כיוון שאין פניו מכוונים כנגד המקום שהתחיל. Since his face is not going to be right, facing the way he started, להתפלל, to pray, ממש דומה כמי שפוסק לגמרי. So it seems like you're stopping the prayers altogether. שאין כוונתו לחזור לתפילתו. So he's not really intending to return to his prayers. ומה שכתב רבנו, that which רבנו wrote, כשיכלה הריח, right, when the smell stops, חוזר למקומו, then he returns to his place. כתב רבנו הגדול מר יבואב. Says מר יבואב, שהטעם, he says the reason is because מפני שצריך שיחזור למקום שהתחיל. He needs to return to the place where he started, להתפלל, to pray, שהרי צריך שיהיה לו מקום מיוחד לתפילה. He needs to have a special place for his prayers, right? A designated place, as we already mentioned before. Everybody should have a designated place where he prays. עד כאן. ואני אומר, it says, I say, אפילו לדברי מי שסובר, even according to one who holds, שלא אמרו אלא שצריך להיות לו בית הכנסת, that they only said regarding, right, a person should have a synagogue that he prays in, מיוחד, right, singled out for that purpose, right? One shul, right, not 10 shuls, right? Sometimes he goes here, sometimes he goes over there. אבל לא בא למקום מיוחד להתפלל בו, but it doesn't really require a special place there, right? כמו שכתבתי בסימן צדיק, like we wrote in chapter 90, Shani Hacha is different over here. שהתחיל כבר להתפלל, since he already started to pray in that place, וכבר קבע שכינה מקום שם, and since now he made a place for this divine presence to be in that place, כשביקש להתעטש, and then when he wanted to pass away, נתרחק ממקום שכינה. He distanced himself from the place of the Shekhinah. ולכך צריך הוא לחזור למקום שקבע. So therefore he has to return to the place where he already established, right, as his prayer location. The Shekhinah. ולסיים שם תפילתו, and to finish his prayers over there. וגם הרמב"ם כתב, says also the Rambam writes, שחוזר למקומו, that he returns to his place. Right, same thing. אלא שלא כתב, he did not write, שחזור למקומו עד אחר שיאמר ריבון העולמים. But according to Rambam, it seems like he says first the prayer that we mentioned, and then return to his place, right? But according to the Torah, it's the opposite, right? First you return, and then you say the prayer. So Rambam says not like that. Okay, interesting. ורבנו כתב שהחזור קודם שאמר ריבון העולמים, נקטינא כדברי רמב"ם. So says the Beit Yosef here, we pass like the Rambam, right? That what? That first he should say the prayer, and then step back to his place. By the way, that makes more sense like that. You following me why it makes more sense? To first say the prayer and then return to the place? I'll explain to you why. The reason is because the prayer that you're saying is not a part of the Amidah. It doesn't really belong in that prayer. You know what I mean? So it's better to say it in a different place because that's not really the fixed prayer that you do every day. So it's better to do it in a different location, because it's not really a part of that, that whole repertoire that you're doing there. Not a part of it. Okay, whatever. So anyway, right? It says Bet Yosef continues. If he was praying, if he was standing in prayer. Oh, so we talked about this before a little bit, right? That he's praying, and all of a sudden, right, he starts to, by accident, right, he started to urinate, right? He couldn't hold it in, and he got some urine on his feet there, on his legs. So it says over there in Gemara, right? You should wait till the water stops, the urination stops, the choser, and then he returns. Like we already explained in chapter 78. So in that case, they didn't require you to say, right, this prayer that we just mentioned before. You made us with holes and holes. Right? It says Rabbeinu Yonah. Shatam, why? What's the reason why? Because when it comes to urine dripping on your legs, right? So he says, here, this guy's a sinner, In other words, how did he get to the point where he's urinating in the middle of the prayer? That means he sinned. So what does that mean? Why is he a sinner? Because he should have used the bathroom before he started. You know what I mean? And then this wouldn't have happened. So the fact that he started praying and didn't use the bathroom beforehand, he's a sinner. Right, so it says the Mikra Nitzach Lakiva Hayam Tchila Velo Nidbak V'Hai Ribon HaOlamim Nitzartan right Lo Nitkan Ela Bebakesh Nitatesh Shehu Anus. So he says this prayer was only made for people who, right, in case like this, to pass away. And why? Because he can't hold it in. There's no way you can hold it in. Anusbo. This is exactly what we say, right? It says in the words of sages, it's known, right? Our shame. That's coming to tell Hashem that you couldn't hold it in, right? There was no choice. So it can't be, can't really hold it in. It says in tradition, right? So says tradition something interesting. He says, but you know what? This halacha, which we see over here, practically speaking, we never saw anybody doing it. Did you ever see somebody like this, steps back 4 amot, and then goes back to his prayers? Nobody does this. So the question is why, right? Why doesn't anybody do it? That's what he's asking. So it says one answer is that people are like holding it in, as much as they can, so they're not stepping back like that. That's what it seems in the Rambam. He says. He says also could be that the reason is mishum de lo chayeshinan levar teshakatsu ela keshemeshaheh al gedolim. Right. So he says because also that the real problem is when a person needs to defecate and he holds it in. That's really a problem. Right, or to urinate. But when it comes to just passing wind, lo asru, they didn't really forbid that. He says, nevertheless, but whoever cannot hold himself, right? But it says, the truth is that bottom line is whoever can't hold it in, he should do it like what we just said, right? Walk back and step, and do this whole ritual, right, that we just mentioned, like we described it. Okay, right? So it says, goes on. שירגישו בדבר, בכל שכן אם הוא שליח ציבור, שיתבזה ויתביישן, look what he says, right? Something really funny. So he says, you know what? It could be that the reason why people don't do this is because it's embarrassing. Can you imagine, like, you step back, everybody looks at you. Oh God, this guy must have, done one of those things. Oh yeah, it's like really this, so it's like, you're embarrassing yourself. So he says, it could be that this is the reason why people don't do it. Because, you're shaming yourself like that. There's all the more so shliach tzibur, that is going to be like shamed by that. Okay. So he says people may, like notice that what he's doing, right? When you read the Ensaich Nami Lomar Nosach de Rabun Alamim, says you don't really have to do, right, this prayer at all. The Shema lo nitkan ela b'marchik b'amamado, because maybe it was only said regarding somebody who steps back. Sheaz murgash v'nireh b'shtik b'boshto, then it's like the shame is revealed. Klimato k'demashma k'tzat nusach, like it implies the language of the prayer. Lufi tam zes, according to this, he says, ha dechivu chachamim le'archik da'adamot. That which rabbis obligated you to step back for amot, lomar, and this to say this prayer. We don't know what I mean. It says it could be that it's talking about only about single person, right? Person who's praying by himself. So there, when he's praying by himself, right, there's no shame, right? So he can do it there. But doing it in front of everybody, right? It's pretty embarrassing. ביזוי בזילותה, קצת נמי יש להוכיח במשום זילותה, ביזוי וקיה גבנה, לא חי שינן לאיסור דרבנן. So he says, right, that also we can prove a little bit that when a person is going to be shamed by something, that we can forego like a rabbinical prohibition. That's what he's saying over here, right? That's exactly what we're doing here. From this story in the Gemara Shabbat, Amud Gimel Amud Aleph, Rabba answer le beidane be'al bartoche perush hatalmidim shaya lehem et kavua lefanav ansu sheisha lekeneva ve'amrinan nami pek. So, right, from this Gemara, he wants to learn that, right, because of shame, you're allowed to hold it in, and not go to the bathroom. Why? Because otherwise you're going to be ashamed in public. Interesting. Okay, so. Goes on. It's also on Yevamot. It says we learned there the Kama Sabe I Akur Mipirke the Ramhuna Alideh Sheishu the Kivem Mekatrim Mistama Lo Hayu Tokfim Umachazakim Shidishot Ela Mechamat Kisufa Vaziluta. So it's also the Nekemar. You learn the same concept there, right? Because of shame, you're allowed to hold it in. And therefore they were not concerned about the prohibition, about the shakatsu, right, of not defiling their body. The same thing applies to this also in our case. He says, in any case, so he says, you know what? The bottom line is like this, that it's very hard, to make these kinds of excuses, right? Like heter, a heter like this, without having like a real, you're going against the Talmud, so you can't just make up your own concepts and go against the Talmud like that. So he says, therefore, to rely on this practically, not really so relevant. I mean, so there you go, right? So this rabbi is telling you in the end, okay, there's some ideas here that I have, maybe it should be allowed because of shame, all kinds of things. But bottom line is, how can you tell somebody practically to break the halakha? You know what I mean? Like the rabbis made it. He doesn't like that so much. So, it definitely makes sense. So we'll do a Shulchan Aruch and we'll stop here. We'll see what we got here. The truth is, we were able to finish the whole chapter here. Let me see what I can do here. So says Shulchan Aruch, right, that if he, again, If he needs the right to pass winds, right, and he can't hold it in. So you should step back, right, as we said, right? Don't make excuses. I can't do it. I'll be ashamed. Step back, 4 amot, right? 4 amot, and do what you have to do, right? To pass the wind. And then you wait till the smell goes away. And then you say this prayer, right? יצרתנו נקבים, חלולים, גלוי וידוע לפניך, right? חרפתנו וכלימתנו, חרפה וכלימה בחיינו, רימה ותולה בית במותינו, right? So basically he's telling Hashem, right, that we're like, stinky, creatures, right? Shameful, we're full of shame. We're right material beings. Then he goes back to his place, like the Rambam said, right? First you do the prayer and then go back. Not like the Tur. The Choserim Kol Masha Pasak. Then you go, right, and continue your prayer, whatever you stopped. So says the Rama over here, right? So some say, right, as we just saw in the Bet Yosef, this only applies when you're praying in your house by yourself. Otherwise, there's shin going on. But when he's praying in the community, to have there's a lot of shame. So then you don't have to go back, and do this whole ritual. And also this prayer, so they just wait till the smell goes away. So the Rama says, right, the Ashkenazim are noheg like that. The custom is like the Tumat Hadeshin that we saw in Beit Yosef. So meaning what? Even though Tumat Hadeshin himself concluded not to do that, but the Ashkenazim took it on. This custom, right? So that's what they do, right? They don't step back. That's what he says in the Rama. But according to Baran, Shulchan Aruch, right, you have to step back and do the whole thing. And by the way, I really wouldn't be, concerned about shame. You know why? You know why you should be concerned about shame? Because people don't know what you're doing. Do you really think anybody realizes what you're doing when you step back like that? They probably think you finished the prayers. Well, they don't know what the heck you're doing. So nobody's going to shame you too much when it comes to this issue. How many people really know what this means? This whole thing. Not relevant, right? So much. So I wouldn't I wouldn't hold my, I wouldn't lose any sleep over this one. So we got one more, right? So it says in the Torah, this is very important, by the way, this one, it says, right, so it says, right? If he does pass wind, right, when he's praying, it's a bad sign for him, right? That's what we mentioned that already, right? But if he sneezes, it's a good sign, right? So sneezing is a good sign when you're praying, but when it comes to passing wind, it's a bad sign, right? So why is it good for sneezing? So it says, right, that Simon Yafelo, just like they gave them some relief below in this world, because sneezing is good, right? It's like a relief. So they also doing you some good things above as well. Right? That's why sneezing is good. So therefore, right, when you're praying Amidah, try to sneeze, but don't pass wind, right? That's the make sure you do like that, right? Okay, good. So let's see Bet Yosef. It says Bet Yosef, right? Where is the source for this? Perek Misha Meto, right over there. Brachot Chavdal Amud Bet. Misha Bari Lo Sheno Yachol Amud Al Atzmo L'Piach Al Mishakmo Kriyat Shema Tefillah. So look what it says, right? If you know for sure you can't finish the Kriyat Shema and the prayers, right, without passing wind, Katav Rabbeinu Mishpato B'Siman Pei. We already learned about that, right, in chapter 80. We said, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that you should not pray or do like a short version of the prayer, so you shouldn't have a problem with this. So says Shulchan Aruch, and we're done. Right? So again, if he passes wind, right, when he's praying, it's a bad sign. What does it mean, bad sign, by the way? Something bad is happening there to him, or will happen, right? That's what it means. Milamala, but if he sneezes, Siman Yafel, that's a good sign for you, right? As we said, it's a relief. So, right. So make sure you do what you have to do, right, to make everything good for you. Okay, very good. So be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. Tomorrow it's going to be Tisha B'Av, right? So if we get together, we have to learn something, different, because we can't do the regular study. We'll have to do like a different topic, like Avelut, mourning, laws of mourning or something. So if you guys are interested in getting together tomorrow for some other topic, which blends into Tisha B'Av, right? We can do it tomorrow. But I have to remind you one thing, right? Tomorrow, when we get together tomorrow, right? Don't ask me how I am, because at Tisha B'Av we don't do that, right? You're not allowed to ask somebody, "How are you? How are you feeling?" At Tisha B'Av we don't ask. So we'll just start and we'll say good evening. That's about it, right? That's all we can do. Okay, God bless you.
Thank you.
Be holy and happy.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All the best.
you.